Friends, this is our fifth lecture. In the first few lectures, we discuss the relationship between population processes and society, and now we will particularly focus on population processes in India and the processes of social change in India. Now, to place population trends in a perspective, we will first talk about social change. So, today's lecture is devoted to social change in India. Now, as such, change is a reality and human society too experiences changes in different domains from time to time. However, all types of changes are not covered by the term social change, which has a definite meaning in sociology. Actually, in society, several types of changes are taking place simultaneously. There is economic change, which means change in say per capita income, change in distribution of income, or change in indicators like contribution of agriculture or industry to gross domestic product. There is purely political change. Political change refers to change in political setup like changes in population size, composition, distribution of population, fertility, mortality, migration, etc. When we talk of social change, it is not any kind of change. For sociologists, all societies have a definite structure, which we defined last time as sum total of all institutions of society, means sum total of customs, traditions, mores, folkways, laws, enacted laws, customary laws, taboos, etiquettes, manners, fads and craze, etc., built around certain core activities of society like family, economy, polity, education and so on. And only that kind of change which changes social relationships or expectations from different roles or institutions, or which changes norms, laws, customs, traditions, fashion, crazes, etc., that is called social change. Social change refers to change in social structure. Thus, change in per capita income, if not accompanied by changes in social relationships, is not part of this social change. So, you can have economic change, but no social change. You can have political change, but no social change. In China, for example, after the Cultural Revolution, there was political change, but social change or cultural change did not immediately follow from political change, and Mao had to create a climate for creating cultural change in society. Similarly, in India, there was political change at the time of independence. The Englishmen left and Indians took over as prime minister, president, chief ministers, bureaucrats and so on, but there was no corresponding social change. One may argue that political change in India produced social change, but social change is a different story and political change is different. If you look back during freedom struggle, there was actually a debate between those leaders who were more for social change first, Dr. Ambedkar and people of that mindset were more for social change first, while others, Gokhale, Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, they wanted first the political change, and they believe that once we become independent, then social change will follow. Now, in today's lecture, we will particularly talk about those types of social changes taking place in Indian society, which may have bearing upon demographic changes. I say that the relationship between society and population is still in infancy, and there is a lot more to be understood. We will try to make a conceptual relationship between social and structural changes and demographic changes, and first we will talk about what kind of social changes are taking place in India. Sociologists have developed several concepts to study social change in India. They are broadly the following type: development and social development, modernization, westernization, universalization, and great and little traditions. For a long time, sociologists and anthropologists in India also use the concept of parochialization and universalization and great and little traditions, which were developed by McKim Marriott and Robert Redfield in studies of Indian and Mexican villages. Among the above, two most popular concepts are Sanskritization and westernization. So, we will specifically focus on Sanskritization and westernization. I will explain what Sanskritization means, who has given this concept, what is westernization, and then I will also little bit talk about globalization and localization. Other concepts are familiar, like development and social development. Usually the term development is used for improvement in productive capacity of an economy. So, if per capita income is improving at a sustained pace, or such forces have been created, such processes have been generated in society which will eventually lead to improvement in per capita income on a sustained basis, we will say economic development is taking place. Social development as opposed to economic development includes literacy, health indicators like life expectancy, status of women, equity or inequity between the rich and the poor, urban and rural areas. And those who talk about social development, they say that ultimate goal of any development is social development. So, it has to be seen whether economic development in a country is leading to social development or not. And modernization refers to a process by which society is developed by using more latest technology. So, modernization is related to technological modernization more than anything else. So, development is economic, social development is social, modernization is technological, and this Sanskritization is purely social. The concept of Sanskritization has been used to explain the processes of cultural change in caste-ridden society of India. It is a truism that social change is caused by both endogenous, means internal, and exogenous, means external factors. Sanskritization concept was developed to show the processes of change in Indian society which arise largely due to endogenous causes, means its own causes, internal causes, internal I can't use the word contradiction, because that word smells of Marxist or conflict theory of society. However, it must be noted that social change occurs due to a large number of known and unknown factors, and their effects are mixed and confounded, some good, some bad. It depends on how you look at social phenomena. It is not possible to attribute any one type of change to any one specific factor. Now, let us look at the concept of Sanskritization. To quote M. N. Srinivas in his studies of empirical studies of villages around Mysore, gave this concept of Sanskritization. And by Sanskritization he means that it is a process by which a low Hindu caste or tribal or other group changes its customs, ritual ideology and way of life. So, it can be changed in anything. It can be changed in customs, which are practices, rituals, religious rituals, ceremonies, ideologies. Ideologies can be social, economic, political, any ideology, and way of life in the direction of a high and frequently a twice born caste. You know that in India we divide all castes or all social groups into two categories. One we call upper caste or twice born, and another we call low caste or born once. Usually Brahmins, Kshatriyas and Vaishya, they are put in the category of twice born, and the others, the low caste, are others, means born only once. It is followed by a claim to a higher position in the caste hierarchy. So, when somebody Sanskritizes customs, rituals, ideology, way of life, any one of them, two of them or all of them, then this is done with the motivation to improve one's position on the caste hierarchy. And it is followed by a claim to a higher position in the caste hierarchy, then traditionally concealed to the claimant caste by the local community. Such claims are made over a period of time, sometimes a generation or two, before they are conceded. This concept of Sanskritization given by Srinivas is an interesting concept. For beginners, it can be a bit complex. So, let me explain this with help of some diagrams. You see, according to Srinivas, caste is an interesting phenomenon. Caste is not Varna, by the way. Indian society has traditionally been divided into 4 Varnas: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudras. But the number of castes is not 4, the number of castes runs into thousands. In India, if you enumerate all possible castes which have existed ever or which are existing today, there is a lot of fusion, fission in castes. But if you add all the caste groups of India, perhaps their number would be more than 50,000. And there is a caste structure. The interesting part of caste structure is that in any region, first we must understand that caste is a regional phenomenon, which means that the castes which are found in region 1 may not even be found in other regions, or their positions in the hierarchy may be quite different. You know, people belonging to Tamil Nadu may not have ever heard the name of certain castes which exist in Uttar Pradesh. If somebody, a traveler comes from Andhra Pradesh and goes to a village of Uttar Pradesh, and somebody, the first thing somebody will ask to a stranger in India is, what is your caste? And he says, I am Kama. Now, the people of Uttar Pradesh would not understand what Kama is, because there is no caste of Kama in Uttar Pradesh. Maybe in remote areas of Uttar Pradesh which are uninfluenced by urban culture. In Uttar Pradesh or in Bihar, people may not have even heard the titles of caste like Reddys or Baniyar, etc., etc. So, it is a local thing. It is an caste is an endogamous basically group, endogamous. Caste is basically an endogamous group marrying within. There may be other associations, there may be some concepts of purity and pollution associated with this, there may be some concept of occupational association, there may be various types of restrictions on mixing, there may be many other things, there may be organization of a caste, leadership and jurisdiction, some region, some area in which laws of a particular caste apply, and therefore, it is a regional phenomenon. But what is interesting is that in all the regions there are some castes which are at the top, and there are some castes which are considered to be at the bottom. Say C infinity at the top and C 0 at the bottom. In between there are a large number of castes. In some regions or in some villages there may be 5, in some villages there may be 10, in some villages their number may go up to say 20 or 25, 25 castes here, and there is a hierarchy. you can arrange all the caste groups in region 1 in a hierarchical manner, means there are some castes which are above the other caste and there is some caste which is at the top, say C infinity and bottom C 0 to use algebraic expression. Now, there is another region, region 2, and here also there is a caste at the top, the C dash infinity, and a caste at the bottom C 0 dash, and again in between there are 50 castes which are arranged hierarchically. Again, hierarchy is important. Now, one interesting aspect of caste system was that this hierarchy was always fluid, means the hierarchy was not well defined, or the notions of high and low were such that they were not equally acceptable to all castes of the region. You know, like if there is a caste of Jats and another caste of Chauhans, both of them are living in the same region. There are several districts in western UP where you have Jats as well as Chauhans. Now, Jats will claim that they are superior to Chauhans, and Chauhans will say they are superior to Jats. So, there are claims, counter claims, and in between there is lot of fluidity. Means the hierarchy is never a clear cut. To understand caste phenomenon in India, it is very important to understand that caste is a regional problem, it is a small endogamous unit, it is not varna, and although there are some castes at the bottom and some castes at the top, but in between there is a lot of fluidity, and there are claims and counter claims, which actually gives rise to the process of Sanskritization. And Srinivas wants to say that generally the notion is that Indian society has been a rigid society, highly stratified society, a society that has remained unchanged for thousands of years, but that is not the case. Indian version of social mobility has been the model of social mobility in India took the form of Sanskritization. Now, Sanskritization means that people at a lower level on the caste hierarchy may by emulating practices, beliefs, rituals, ideologies, the terms used by M. N. Srinivas, claim a superior status on the caste hierarchy, and this can be done in 5 years time, 10 years time, over a generation, sometime over several generations. So, India too had a model of mobility. The difference between Western model of mobility and Indian model of mobility is that in India mobility was always mobility of the caste or a larger group, not an individual phenomenon, while in the West mobility is individual, but in India mobility was associated with groups and castes. So, this is Sanskritization. By Sanskritization, people belonging to lower caste, lower social groups in society claim a superior status on the caste hierarchy. Now, this also means, theoretically speaking, it becomes extremely impossible to make an all India hierarchy of all the castes of India. Something which commissions like backward commission in India try to do. Lots of problems will arise if you try to make an all India list of high and low caste. It is quite possible that a caste which is high in region 1 is at a much lower level in region 2. A caste which is at a lower level here is at a much higher level in region 2. that make the caste and caste mobility or Sanskritization a complex phenomenon. It is an interesting part of history. If you read history of Sanskritization in India, so there have been instances in which there were disputes, including violent disputes, riots, for something like donning a sacred thread, that people belonging to lower caste, after Sanskritizing their lifestyle, they claim a Brahminical status, that they are Brahmins or they are part of twice born, that now they have Sanskritized their lifestyle, they are part of twice born, and they should be allowed to wear sacred thread, something which the upper caste would resist, and that leads to violent conflicts. Ultimately, these kinds of conflicts are resolved through political intervention, and the king, the monarch, the king will decide which social group should be placed where, whether a particular social group has the right to wear sacred thread or not. It's there are I don't want to spend much time on this issue alone, but there are lots of instances like Nayars of Kerala. Nayars of Kerala are treated like Kshatriyas, but there are many Nayar groups which were originally part of what we call Shudras, and because these groups helped the king at some point of time during war or something. So, the king declared that from now onwards they will be called Kshatriyas. So, this is how different social groups in society moved up or down, and this was Sanskritization. But it must be emphasized that in Sanskritization, although there is change of position of different castes, but there will be no structural change, means the concept of high and low, the concept of hierarchy, these things continue. I remember when I read M. N. Srinivas's Social Change in India first time, I was shocked to see a statement that, as a matter of fact, in India the real Kshatriyas were vanished about 2000 years ago. Nuns, according to some historians, were the last dynasties of Kshatriyas. After that, anybody who captured power became a Kshatriya. There were also castes of Bhatts. In Hindi we call Charan or Bhat, or in Rajasthan they are called Baibacha, genealogists. And it was the work of genealogists to trace genealogies of different people. So, when somebody belonging to a lower caste becomes the king, then the some genealogists or all genealogists of that region may come forward to recreate a history of that caste and somehow attach that caste to descendants of some mythological character. Like they may say that they are descendants of Lav or Kush or Bharat or Ram or Lakshman, and this is how that low caste or a Shudra caste person and his family are elevated to the status of Kshatriya. But this is all positional change, and this does not lead to any structural change in society. Now, from this Sanskritization theory, for us students of population, what is more interesting is the idea of emulation or idea of diffusion, or the idea that the people belonging to lower social groups start behaving like people of the upper group. So, what happens in the upper group subsequently that diffuses to lower sections of society. So, Varna is an all, as I said, Varna is an all India framework, and in this framework human society is divided into 4 hierarchical groups: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. Untouchables are outside the Varna system. On the other hand, caste refers to hereditary endogamous groups which form a hierarchy, each having a traditional association with 1 or 2 occupations, and caste groups maintain relations in terms of purity and pollution. Through Sanskritization, that is by changing customs, rituals, ideology and way of life towards upper caste, people belonging to a particular caste claim a superior status on the caste hierarchy. This may or may not be granted. Srinivas maintained that Sanskritization, however, led only to positional change, means change in position of some specific castes which were trying to Sanskritize their ideology and rituals and lifestyles, maybe learning of Sanskrit language, maybe becoming vegetarian, maybe taking to prayers, maybe reading of Ramcharitmanas and Mahabharata, whatever. This means that the perceived positions of different castes may change, but it would not affect the Hindu belief in caste hierarchy. To be Hindu is to belong to a caste with a relative place in the hierarchical division. Some sociologists used to say, including Srinivas, that Hindu religion is closely associated with caste, and the end of caste system in India can also be the end of Hindu religion. This is too strong a statement, and this may not happen. Srinivas agrees that Sanskritization was only one source of mobility in Hindu society. Initially, he observed that Sanskritization means emulating the lifestyles of Brahmins, but later on he said that no, he gave the idea of dominant caste, and the dominant caste can be any. Dominant caste can be Brahmins, dominant caste can be Kshatriyas, dominant caste can be Vaishyas. In certain regions, dominant caste can be scheduled castes or scheduled tribes, and in some areas dominant caste may be Muslims also. And accordingly, he developed different models of Sanskritization. Initially, he started with Brahminical model of Sanskritization, but later on he talked about Brahmin model of Sanskritization, Kshatriya model of Sanskritization, Vaishya model of Sanskritization, and Shudra model. In some regions where castes classified as Shudras are dominant, people belonging to other castes in that region may start emulating ideology, rituals, practices, food habits of the Shudras. There have been tribalization in several areas. The model of Sanskritization has been tribal model of Sanskritization. In many parts of Uttarakhand, for example, where certain tribes were dominant, it was found that the migrants, non-tribal migrants from the plains started developing food habits of the tribal areas or the tribal people for better accommodation, assimilation, absorption in the new society, and this is something that can be called tribal model of Sanskritization. The concept of dominant caste supplemented the concept of Sanskritization in some way. At some places, if the tribal groups were dominant, the other groups followed the tribal concept, and thus one can also speak of a tribal model of Sanskritization. Why I am putting a lot of emphasis on Sanskritization, and let me connect this Sanskritization to something purely population or something related to demography. In one of our studies recently, census data also show the same thing. Census data has been showing that some of the developed regions of the country have the highest fall in juvenile sex ratio in the recent times, means indicating increasing practice of female feticide, sex determination and female feticide. Ashish Bose developed a new acronym for that, DMARU states, Delhi, Haryana, Western UP, Punjab, these regions have more of this problem. Even in regard to religious communities, you may find that Jains, some of the most educated and most prosperous community in India, have the least juvenile sex ratio, 0 to 6 sex ratio, females by males in age group 0 to 6. Our own studies in some rural areas of Kanpur show that the practice of sex determination is more among the upper caste and upper classes. Now, using the Sanskritization perspective, I can say that what is found among the upper caste, upper classes, or like census data shows, what is found first in the developed regions of the country will eventually diffuse to other regions. Like today it is Haryana, tomorrow it can be Bihar or West Bengal, and the practice of sex determination can diffuse to those areas. Similarly, what is found first among Jains, gradually it can diffuse to other religions. Sikhs already have a very low juvenile sex ratio. Gradually, this thing can spread to Muslims and to Christians also. And what is found among the upper caste, upper classes will gradually diffuse to lower caste and lower classes if the Sanskritization perspective is correct. For a long time, Sanskritization worked well. The major factors in Sanskritization were fluidity of political system, position of the dominant caste, pilgrimage from one place to another. From end to end, India was one homogeneous culture. And Dr. Ambedkar also talked about India being a homogeneous universal culture from end to end, and he said that before the British came to India, Indians actually would not recognize the difference between races, whether somebody is Dravidian or Aryan. Anybody who becomes the king is called Arya. So, if Dr. Ambedkar says this, that anybody who becomes the king becomes Arya, then you can see what kind of culture we lived in. Then the position of dominant caste, pilgrimage, migration of values and beliefs from great tradition. The term great tradition and little great tradition is used for textual, formal, all India universal character of a religion. Ramayana, Mahabharata, Valmiki Ramayana, Mahabharata or Ved Vyas, Gita, Manu Smriti, other Yagyavalkis, other Smritis, Shastras, they are part of great tradition of India, great tradition of Hindus in India. And there are little traditions. There are traditions, folk tradition, folk cultures, specific to villages, specific to certain communities, specific to certain regions at the lower level. And there is always a migration of culture from great tradition to little tradition. So, deities, ideas, practices of little tradition are explained using the concept of great tradition. And similarly, ideas of great tradition are diffused to little tradition. There was a time M.N. Srinivasan himself talks about something like picture forth. When I read M.N. Srinivasan's book Social Change in India first time, and I found reference of picture forth, even being a Hindu and a Brahmin, I could not understand what is this picture forth. He was saying that this picture forth has come from some kind of great tradition to little tradition and is spreading. Picture forth is Karwa Chauth. Now, Karwa Chauth was part of little tradition of India. You do not find reference to Karwa Chauth in Ramayana or Mahabharata or Gita or Smritis or Shastras, but today this Karwa Chauth or picture forth has become part of great tradition of India. Thanks to media, thanks to newspaper and television channels showing celebration of picture forth. This picture forth maybe starting in some small parts of western UP has moved to all parts of India and may be seen as becoming part of the great tradition. So, that is another source of change. Then secular factors also determine the position of caste in addition to pollution and purity. If a caste is numerically large, if a caste is more educated, if people belonging to certain castes are working in cities, in high quality jobs, in bureaucracy, in army, in universities, the status of that caste is elevated. Then migration to new areas. When people migrate from one place to another, then the status of caste may go up or go down. Then bhakti movement that established the idea of equality before God, that everybody is equal, thus the idea of equality among different groups and castes. Now, after independence of the country, the issue of social mobility became more complex and cases of Sanskritization, desanskritization as well as re-sanskritization were observed. Desanskritization means that somebody maintaining a distance from the upper caste. In Sanskritization there is diffusion or there is emulation or imitation of upper caste. In desanskritization it is maintaining a distance or it is saying that we are more pure, that the upper castes are impure, we are more pure kind. So, Yogen Singh in his book Modernization of Indian Tradition has mentioned several instances from different parts of UP, where people belonging to certain lower castes stopped accepting water from Brahminical castes. This was desanskritization. Then there is also resanskritization, that maybe there is a caste like Kshatriyas first becoming westernized and then becoming Sanskritized. After independence, joining today we call Bharatiya Janata Party, at that time there was Jan Sangh. So, they were resanskritized. So, all these processes of Sanskritization, desanskritization, westernization were observed simultaneously. Now, due to the policy of positive discrimination adopted by Indian government, now an increasing number of groups are making claim to backward status rather than high status. That is also a source of one can say desanskritization. Some of them claim a backward status in state matters and a forward status in a society. I see that this is not to hurt sentiments of anyone, but I have seen that there are certain castes like Kurmi. When a Kurmi will write matrimonial, in matrimonial he will write that needed a groom or a bride for Kurmi Kshatriya person, but for the purpose of interaction with the state, they are backward. So, in some domains you become backward to gain the benefit of policy of positive discrimination, and in social domain otherwise you claim a superior status. So, Yadavs and Kurmis, they will say that they are descendants of Lav and Kush, and from that perspective they are the upper caste, they are Kshatriyas, but for the purpose of gaining benefits from state they are backward. So, the situation has become much more complex. Yes, I said that today I will talk about Sanskritization, westernization, globalization and glocalization. Sanskritization itself has taken so much time. So, let me be fast and come to the concept of westernization. According to Srinivas, this term westernization has been defined by several people, but M. N. Srinivas in the same book Social Change in India defines westernization in a more precise way. It is the change brought about in Indian society and culture, both society and culture, as a result of over 150 years of British rule. The term subsuming changes occurring at different levels: technology, institutions, knowledge and values. So, everything was changed. Westernization means change brought about by 150 years of British rule. You know, the Englishmen, the British had a different technology, they had their own different institutions of family, education and so on. Their level of knowledge in the so called external world, even Indians accept that in the external world they had higher knowledge, and values, Western values of success, materialism as against the value of spiritualism in India. Now, this westernization produced a number of things which have demographic consequences: humanitarianism, secularism, equalitarianism, rationality and attack on untouchability. These are all results of westernization. You do not find humanitarianism, secularism, equalitarianism, rationality etc. in pre-British India having such high stature as you see them having today. Rationality and humanitarianism may be called the hallmark of westernization. Srinivas recognizes the importance of local culture in determining the nature of westernization. For many people it produces cultural schizophrenia, a very powerful concept, but not in a pathological sense. Normally when we say schizophrenia, it refers to a psychopathological state, a dual personality, an abnormality. But when Srinivas is using the term cultural schizophrenia, he is using it, he qualifies by saying it is in a non-pathological sense, which means that people who became westernized in some domains of life, mostly in office, maintain tradition in other domains, for example, at home. Now, this is a case of cultural schizophrenia. What will you say that this groom going for his marriage, maybe to become part of his marriage procession, is he westernized or is he traditional? Perhaps he is both. As far as rituals are concerned, he is riding a female horse, it is traditional, and he is wearing a modern jacket, he is modern. People are becoming both modern and traditional simultaneously, and it is but in different domains without any conflict. It must also be noted that there were different western influences on different people of India. Everybody did not westernize in the same way, because they came in contact of different types of British people, administrators, army men, traders, Christian missionaries. Srinivas also showed that the movement from tradition to westernization was not linear, that you start with tradition and then you become more and more western or more and more modern. Westernization also produced revivalism, nationalism, communalism, casteism, vertical and horizontal solidarity between different communities, heightened linguistic consciousness, regionalism and passionate xenophobia among Muslims. Don't you see that television channels are promoting certain traditional things? I sometimes wonder that things which my parents or my forefathers considered to be superstitious, part of belief systems only, not having any scientific, not having any rational truth behind them, like Dishasul or this Vastu or different magical and ritual phenomena, tantra, mantra. These TV channels, which is a modern phenomenon, cable TV is promoting Vastu, cable TV is promoting astrology. When you open some TV channel in the morning, some Swamiji or some sadhu or somebody is telling you which mantra can solve all your problems. What is this? Is this modernization or traditionalization? This is certainly not traditional. Use of TV channels for promotion of religion, this is not traditional, but this is not completely Western also. Then what is this? This is westernization in the form of acceptance of new technology, leading to spread of certain traditional beliefs like Vastu and astrology and palmistry and so on, or mantra, these things. It is not what we say, that it is not a linear phenomenon. Sometimes westernization can also produce national, as a matter of fact, nationalization or nationalism or communalization or communalism have been the product of westernization only. English education, that is why Gandhiji rejected English education, and he believed that English education in India can create all kinds of problems, including problems of casteism, communalism, disrespect to elderly people, rejection of tradition and so, abandoning of the basic values of love, truth or religion, and produce a strange kind of communalism and groupism, linguistic consciousness and so on. In some contexts, westernization led to rejection of the tradition, while in others it led to mixing or combination of traditions and western influences. Westernization is accompanied by urbanization, but the two are different things. Urbanization refers to increase in percent population in urban areas and not to western values. There may be urbanization, but no westernization. In Indian context, we say that there is rurbanization, that Indian urban areas are basically rurban. They are not urban towns and cities in the sense in which towns and cities of the West have been urban, and there are many pockets, or sometimes the whole town or city may reflect the culture of rural areas, rural institutions, rural belief systems, rural practices, and therefore the term rurban, rural plus urban. Another thing which we must notice happening in India and which will affect our population trends is globalization. Uh, the globalization or the world becoming one global village, is defined by different people in different ways, but basically it means flow of resources, capital, humans and technology from one country to another. In 20th century India, both society and population have changed, and India is experiencing several processes of change such as demographic transition, industrialization, urbanization, skill development, social mobility, legal changes and greater assertion of autonomy. Among them, effects of globalization and localization are very significant. Globalization is economic, localization is cultural. The former concept refers to free flow of labor and capital, and localization to local changes in local cultural categories. Glocalization has given rise to new meanings of tradition and modernization. Although Lee defined glocalization as the simulation of modernity for the spread of community forms in local cultures, students of sociology understand these terms well. It cannot be isolated from the replacement of thought categories in the process of commodity glocalization. These processes of change have both functions and dysfunctions. Functions are opening of demographic window. We will talk about demographic window in the next or after that next to next lecture. Improvement in literacy, rapid expansion of education at all levels, flow of labor capital and technology across international borders, with emigrants sending a significant part of remittances, increased productivity of service and industrial sectors, infrastructure development and new opportunities caused by aging of industrialized economies, empowerment of women and new ideas of equality. But there are also some dysfunctions: environmental degradation, increasing marginalization among the agricultural laborers, rising disparities, religious and community bigotry, trafficking of women, a large number of cases of female feticide, violence against women, and at the root of many other dysfunctions, an idea that all the emergent problems of the country are due to history. This is a definition of globalization and localization. This is from Lee. I can skip this part, you can read it later from the slides. At the end of this, I may say that so far sociologists have focused on social change and demographers on demographic change. There is a need to understand the link between the social and demographic changes. The issues are: what is the impact of globalization on demographic trends in the developing countries like India? Does demographic transition promote forces of globalization and localization? Globalization in the sense of transfer of capital, technology and labor, and localization in the sense of transmission of culture from one part to another, but in such a manner that the local cultures find as though the products delivered by forces of globalization are to meet or to satisfy the values of the local culture, folk culture. Don't we find that there are when we celebrate Deepavali, we buy idols of Lakshmi, Ganesh, and we buy crackers and we buy many things which are traditional in nature, not made by Indian industries or Indian artisans, but by Chinese manufacturing companies. So, this is globalization. Chinese are sending their ideals, toys, crackers, calendars, and we are buying them as though they are to serve our Indian culture. Will demographic transition in developing countries too will be followed by second demographic transition? This is a term which I will define a little later when I talk about demographic transition in particular. Demographic transition essentially means changeover from high fertility, high mortality situation to low fertility, low mortality situation as associated with processes of industrialization, urbanization and economic development. This has happened in the West and this is happening in the less developed countries or developing countries today. This is going to happen in the so called least developed countries also. But there is second demographic transition, which is while first demographic transition was considered to be something good for society, the second transition is seen as highly dysfunctional for the survival of mankind. This has already happened in European countries. In European countries like Sweden, Denmark, Iceland, now you find people are shying away from marriage, late marriage, no marriage. Can you imagine in India, if a child is born outside wedlock, that child, he or she, is considered to be illegitimate child, and illegitimacy is not very common in India. But in countries like Iceland, you will be surprised to know that as many as 70% children are born outside the wedlock. This is second demographic transition. That loss of importance of certain institutions like marriage, reproduction, women just not taking interest in family and reproduction, people not marrying, and the disassociation between reproduction, marriage and family. That is second demographic transition. Right in the beginning I said that there are two sources of changes in any society, endogenous and exogenous. Sanskritization is endogenous, completely endogenous, and I gave the example of how practice of sex determination and feticide is diffusing from upper caste and upper classes to lower caste, lower classes. This is an example of influence of Sanskritization. You can also find similar examples of migration of ideas between great tradition and little traditions of India, and these are kind of endogenous changes. But changes brought about by westernization, globalization today and globalization resulting from globalization, they are parts of changes produced by exogenous factors. They are changes of exogenous type. Then what is the relevance of globalization and localization for demographic trends? Globalization, westernization, globalization promoted westernization. Actually, from M.N. Srinivas's point of view, westernization comes first, globalization is only post 90s phenomenon, but something is common, and that common is traveling of ideas from the west to the east. Now, due to westernization and globalization, status of women is rising, our women are getting more education, they are competing with men for jobs, and in urban areas there is live-in relationship. Already there are many women, careerist women in metropolitan cities who are not interested in marriage or childbirth. So, will this globalization, westernization, education of women, new culture, travel of ideas from western societies to our societies not create a situation in which second demographic transition also occurs in our country? What are the likely response of cultural communities? It is very interesting, sociologists must study this, because cultural communities are not silent. They are reacting in different, sometimes peaceful, sometimes violent manner to forces of globalization and localization. Sometimes they want to take up the best from globalization, like not to say anything good or bad about Baba Ramdev, but Baba Ramdev is taking the good part of globalization. He is buying the best machine, when scientific technology to promote Ayurvedic medicines. So, he claimed that he is making the best herbal medicines in India using the western technology, and globalization has made that possible. So, there is in certain domain there is acceptance of globalization, but he is also rejecting globalization and westernization and wants people to come back to Indian values and traditions. There are communities like the Khaps of Jats in Haryana who are reacting violently to globalization, westernization and localization, and you know that they are making an issue that marriage law in India should be changed, and marriage between Gotraj should be banned. That is another kind of reaction to forces of globalization. In the next lecture, we will learn about the emerging model of inclusive growth in India. So, this lecture shows that we are in a complex situation, and how the state is trying to create a more egalitarian society, taking into consideration interests of all sections of society.